Suzanne F. Stevens, Chief Edge Optimizer for the Ignite Excellence Group of Initiatives. One of our key initiatives is the Ignite Excellence Foundation, where we invest, inspire, and develop future leaders in emerging countries. With that spirit, we produce Wisdom Exchange TV, where we interview pioneers, trailblazers, leaders of many in business, philanthropy, education, as well as politics. Today we're in Joburg, or Johannesburg. I've been here a while, so I can get away with Joburg, South Africa, with our leading lady, Jane Trembath, who is an airline captain and inspirational speaker. Jane has been flying since 1982. She is one of the first lady pilots into a somewhat skeptical male environment in South Africa. She had many proud moments with females first in South Africa aviation, but also made some spectacular mistakes, which she doesn't mind admitting, in navigating the minefield of being a woman in a man's world. Absolute pleasure to meet you finally, because I've been trying to interview you for a year, and finally made it back to Johannesburg to do that. So absolute pleasure to meet you, Jane.
Lovely too, Suzanne.
Now, it's interesting you use the word aggression. I've had a lot of conversations with women about the word aggression, where women get called aggressive and men assertive, and one's positive and one's negative. And, you know, sometimes, though, don't you think that, yes, you may be aggressive, because people are saying that, but don't you think sometimes it's also their view of the world that they're putting onto you, that they perceive that that's aggressive, but if someone else was to do the same thing, it may not be?
Well, we come back to this communication that we were talking about, that women don't know how to actually put it across. And when you get challenged, for example, then at first you try not to say anything, and eventually they push and push, and then it comes out the wrong way, then you snap back. And that is aggression. But when women learn how to be properly assertive, then they can deal with it before that frustration builds up. And this thing about aggression, not being suitable for women, it's something that we still have to have within ourselves, because there will be times when you have to use it. And I can think of times in my life, perhaps not in flying, but in my personal life, when I've been in a situation where aggression was the only thing that got the right result. And when I say the right result, I'm talking about what's right, for the entire environment, not just right for me. And aggression, I tried assertion and it didn't work, and that's when I had to use aggression. So we've got to know also that these things are good in their own way, and we must use them as part of our toolbox, but in the correct circumstances.
Interesting that you're saying that, because a lot of it is about using aggression, from what I understand what you're saying, using it not emotionally, but using it because you want to use it. It's consciously saying, I need to be aggressive in this situation, rather than, you made me upset, now I'm going to be aggressive.
Yes.
Is that, am I understanding what you're saying correctly? Because, see, a lot of, to your point, and I do a lot of training in this area in regards to personality traits, and certain people will take it on because they're nice people. And then they explode.
Yes, that's exactly it.
And that's when it's bad aggression, because it's not controlled, it's not directed. You didn't choose for that to happen. It's just it just had to happen.
Yes, but that's what they've been taking it on, and they didn't know how to stop it with assertion by saying, I'm going to address your behavior here. I did learn in aggression versus assertion is that it's the way that you address a thing. I found that if you're addressing a person's behavior, it's something they can change. If you're talking to the person themselves saying, oh, but you are rude, or then that's an attack on him, and he can't change who he is, but he can change what he does. So it's just learning to address the behavior and not the person, which it's a fine distinction. But once you're aware of that, then you can just simply express yourself differently, and then you'll be perceived as more assertive and not aggressive. I think as women, we do ourselves a disservice a lot of the time because we haven't been taught the proper ways of communication. It's just verbal habits as well, which we've learned how to use them within groups of women. But when we're in a business situation, then we're perceived as powerless because we're using the wrong type of verbal habits, verbal communication with the people we're dealing with.
Great advice, and focusing on the behavior. Now, as a captain, you're also a leader of a crew. Yet you're also very operational.
Yeah.
So how do you lead from the cockpit?
Well, my challenge is, first of all, that I have a different situation. On every flight, it's different. I've got a different crew. It might be people I've never even met before. Sometimes I'm lucky and I would know them. Certainly my cockpit crew, I might know them a little bit. But then every circumstance is different. You might have difficult passengers, you've got bad weather, and you've just got to deal with everything as it comes. In our technical problems that we have, we've been trained for that. We've got a very defined structure of how we deal with that. So if I have a system that goes wrong, then we can do our checklist in the proper way. But when things go awry in a different situation, like I have an unruly passenger or I have crew members who get into an argument, that's when I've got to access my inner wisdom and deal with it as it comes up.
I'm just picturing, far as if there is a passenger on the plane that goes, who deals with that? Like, does the crew deal with that and then talk to you to let you know what's going on, or how does that work? And then what kind of communication would happen?
Yes, that's the way it's meant to happen. But I find that sometimes the crew don't deal with it in the proper way. For instance, I had a flight a while back where I'd been resting. We carry extra crew on the long-range flight so that we can all take a rest. And I'd been resting, and I came back from my rest, and the co-pilot had gone to the back of the airplane, and the crew had called him to go and help them with a drunk passenger. Now that is a total no-no, because if I have a drunk passenger who lashes out at one of my cockpit crew, then it's a safety risk. And the crew in the back are taught how to deal with it, and they just hadn't followed the procedure. But that was on the one leg of the flight. On the first leg, where I'd had the other crew, they'd also let the cabin crew go off duty at various times, and the other half of the crew had been on duty. And they'd had an unruly passenger, and they'd dealt with this guy brilliantly. So I held a debrief afterwards, and I discussed with them the importance of how to deal with it, and I gave them some lessons in assertion as well, I must tell you, and just to remind them of what their responsibilities are. So, as you talk about leading from the cockpit, it's not always a comfortable thing to have to tell them things like that, but I had to debrief them and just get them on track so that we don't have that situation in future.
Yeah. So the things that you would have debriefed them on in the assertion, was it that part of the behavior piece? Was there anything else that you would have talked to them about on how to deal with that sort of situation?
Well, I did go through the procedure and reminded them of the procedure they were meant to follow. And just to remind them, because now unfortunately the group who dealt with it badly were a group of women. And this was an aggressive male passenger. But they're taught to deal with it, and there's no reason why they can't deal with it if they have the confidence to do so. So I just tried to emphasize that they are still in charge, and they've got to see themselves as being in charge. That's something I find also that the members of the crew, they see me, I'm the captain, and I'm the leader. But what they don't understand is that the passengers see them as leaders as well. And I've got co-pilots, and the cabin crew see my co-pilots as leaders as well. So for the crew, it's even though somebody might not be the CEO of a company, even if you are in a very humble position, you are still a leader in some way or other. And I think about parents, they might not even have a job, but they are still leaders of their children. So leadership skills are something which is essential for everybody from top to bottom. I just had to emphasize with those girls that they were still in charge and that they had to take the lead when it was required of them.
So can you share with us what they should have done?
Well, the procedure is that when you have an unruly passenger, then you warn them verbally. And if they don't respond, if they carry on...
Like, we're going to cut you off drinking, we need you to calm down, that sort of thing?
Yeah, we need you to stop poking other people and stop shouting.
Okay.
Then if they don't respond to that, then you have a form which says now you are being a nuisance and you sign this form or just accept it to know that this is your final warning and you've got to toe the line. And then the last resort is, well, I must tell you, we do have handcuffs on board if they get out of hand. And the last resort is I would have a passenger arrested at the other end. And on that trip we were going to Brazil, so they don't want to land up in a Brazilian jail, I can promise you. But I do, as part of my duties as a leader, I do say that I will support my crew in enforcing discipline on board because it's a safety risk. You're over the ocean and the nearest place to land is about 3 hours away. So if you've got somebody causing a problem on board, then you've got to deal with it on board. And that crew's got to take command. And we can't just go to the nearest airport and offload them. It doesn't work like that.
So how would you define leadership then?
I would define leadership as being able to come up with a solution in a tough situation and to implement that solution and get the people to buy into it. Although, of course, we know there are different styles of leadership, everything from delegating to dictating and everything in between. But what's appropriate for the situation?
Now, can you provide sort of what you perceive, a list of criteria that you think an effective leader should have, no matter if they're a captain, and we'll look at your world, a captain, a co-pilot, or a crew member?
They must have personal wisdom. They've got to know who they are. There's a quote that I love by an ancient Chinese philosopher called Lao Tzu. And he said, knowing others is intelligence, but knowing yourself is true wisdom. So that's the first criteria, is you've got to know yourself so that you can access that personal wisdom. A leader's also got to have credibility. So you've got to know how much responsibility to take and understand that everything that you do has got consequences and know how to balance that, as well as knowing how to deal with mistakes. As a leader, you've got to know how to take charge and say difficult things, and a leader's got to have integrity as well. That's the most important thing, I think, in having credibility, is having integrity, that people know that they can have faith in you, that they can trust you, and you will do that for yourself also by staying true to yourself and not doing things for the wrong reasons. And lastly, I think a leader's got to have vision as well. You've got to be able to see that big picture and be able to put everything into the picture and know where you should go. But it all starts on a very personal level, learning those lessons personally, and then they just flow globally. You need to apply them.
What do you think is the most difficult leadership criteria to continuously deliver on?
Standing up and dealing with difficult situations. It's uncomfortable for everybody, let's face it. And every time it happens, you think, oh no, how am I going to deal with this? But I found as soon as I just asked myself that question, how am I going to deal with this? It's like I'm accessing my higher wisdom. Yeah, women, I find, tend to, if something happens, I think, oh no, I don't know what to do. And then you're just sending yourself such a negative message. But when you ask, how shall I deal with this? Just give it time, and the answer pops into your head. Like, I can think of another situation where I had two crew members who got into an argument. And one of them was one of my cockpit crew and a cabin crew. And it wasn't too long before landing, and I was sitting there, the other co-pilot had asked permission to go back to the galley, and the next thing, these two came in shouting at each other. So the first thing I did is I just took charge of the situation, because it's a safety risk. I said, quiet, we all deal with this on the ground. So I made them shut up. And then I thought to myself, now how am I going to deal with this? So I had, from then until landing, nothing could sort of come to mind. But as soon as I called the crew together to have this discussion, my gut feel, my inner voice just kind of produced the right words. But I knew that I had to sit and ask myself that question instead of saying to myself, oh, I don't know what I'm going to do. And it did, the right words just came, and the right way of dealing with it just came. And it was a combination of experience and gut feel, but the two of them together produced the right result, which was best for everybody.
Mm-hmm. It's an excellent piece of advice too, is asking yourself the question and how you're asking yourself that question.
Yeah.
Rather, do I know this? No. How am I going to deal with this? Now, what was the most challenging aspect of your career?
It was probably getting over the mistakes that I've made, because another problem with women in a man's world is that there's few of you, so you're visible. And when you make a mistake, then the people who don't want women there are still men who think women should be behind the kitchen sink. And when you make a mistake, then there's no mercy. So getting over my mistakes has been the most challenging.
Okay. Thank you so much, Jane, for sharing with us today. Again, my name is Suzanne Stevens, and I co-produce Wisdom Exchange TV alongside my husband, Michael K. Ginrich. We're traveling all over Africa with backpacks, interviewing women leaders like the woman we met today. If you know a woman we should interview, please email us at info@wisdomexchangetv.com. Join us on our Facebook fan page at Wisdom Exchange TV, as we're updating that regularly, as well as our homepage of Wisdom Exchange TV, where we take people we've interviewed and syndicate their blogs, and there's new information on that every single day. So join us there as well. Thanks for joining us.